All right. Thanks for your patience, everyone. It is just an incredible honor to be once again facilitating a conversation between two of the most preeminent and respected scholars of Palestine, Israel, the region, and commentators on what is now 2 years of genocide in Gaza. Uh, Sorry, getting a little feedback from myself. Apologies for that. Norm Finkelstein and Mouin Rabbani, thanks for coming back and joining us here on Bad Faith Podcast again.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to
It's
be
a,
on your program again.
it's a pleasure to be with you too.
It,
I've burned a lot of bridges and in my day, and I'm very glad that I preserved the one with Mouin, and I hope to preserve the one with you because you two are really the top of the line and you're principled.
well, Norman, it will be a really, really sad day for me if I ever manage to burn a bridge with you. It won't be happening on my
No,
end
Norm
of
will
the
be the
bridge.
one doing it.
I hate to think of what I could possibly do to transgress, given that you have such thick skin, Norm, and are made of such stern stuff. But
Just just try just try pulling a Matt Taibbi on me and you'll see what happens.
I appreciate you saying that. Just as I appreciate for folks watching who haven't caught it, the most recent episode of Bad Faith, I had the pleasure of interviewing Max Blumenthal, another amazing reporter on Gaza, who is one of the few, frankly, that's kind of been in the media mix with Matt Taibbi, who's been willing to state plainly that he's been deeply disappointed in Matt's sort of the Gaza-shaped hole in his First Amendment coverage. So today, there are many aspects of the news to cover with respect to Gaza. So many things that have happened over the past 2 years. But I want to start with a related question of integrity and how to talk about this particular issue. This is a kind of newsy tidbit. Folks have been offering some commentary today on Zohran Mamdani's statement about the 2-year anniversary. And I wonder what the two of you make of it. Have either of you seen it already?
No.
Unfortunately, no.
Okay, I am going to throw it up on the screen and read it. And I want to get your guys' perspective here. He wrote, 2 years ago today, Hamas carried out a horrific war crime, killing more than 1,100 Israelis and kidnapping 250 more. I mourn these lives and pray for the safe return of every hostage still held and for every family whose lives were torn apart by these atrocities. In the aftermath of that day, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli government launched a genocidal war, a death toll that now far exceeds 67,000, with the Israeli military bombing homes, hospitals, and schools into rubble. Every day in Gaza has become a place where grief itself has run out of language. I mourn these lives and pray for the families that have been shattered. Our government has been complicit through it all. This must end. The occupation and apartheid must end. Peace must be pursued through diplomacy, not war crimes, and our government must act to end these atrocities and hold those responsible to account. These last 2 years have demonstrated the very worst of humanity. We must answer it by modeling the very best, a relentless pursuit of our higher ideals, and an unwavering commitment to universal human rights. Now, my impression, given some of the reaction on the internet, is that there's a negative reaction to the first paragraph, in particular, in the framing of this 2-year anniversary statement in the context of, quote, Hamas carrying out a horrific war crime. Do either of you have immediate thoughts or feelings about this?
Sorry, Norm, did you want to say something?
I'd like to hear you first.
No, I think, one can find fault and quibble with this or that part of the statement, what he chose to lead with, the both sidism, if you will. Although I don't think in principle there's anything particularly wrong with also drawing attention to the attacks of October 7th. But I would just say, for an American politician, 1 month out from his election, to put out a statement like this is nothing short of revolutionary. And it shows how much times have changed. I mean, a statement like this would have been inconceivable 5 years ago. Even if Zohran Mamdani genuinely believes it's a genocide, and 5 years ago, and genuinely believes it's an apartheid state and all the rest of it, he would have maybe at most concluded with an anodyne appeal, to return to negotiations to reach our common objective of a two-state settlement or whatever. But for an American politician to be able to say these words this clearly, and as virtually everyone expects, still win an election in just a few weeks, I consider nothing short of revolutionary.
Norm, do you feel the same way?
I agree with Mouin. Sometimes you should just not nitpick. Overall, no, allow me, because I will get to what you say. If you take the statement in total, it's an excellent statement. The obvious problem with it is it says everything began on October 7th. Had I written the statement, I would have begun with, for 70, whatever number of years it is now, Palestinians have lived under occupation. 80% of the people of Gaza are refugees from the 1948 war. The situation in Gaza on the eve of October 7th was, as the Economist magazine said, Gaza was, quote, a human rubbish heap. And in those circumstances, October 7th happened. And then I would go on to the rest, because I don't believe you can understand October 7th, as I'm sure both of you agree. I don't believe you can understand it unless you take into account what preceded it. To leave out what preceded it, I'll just give you a simple analogy. So on so-and-so day in 1831, Nat Turner went out with some 45 other slaves and started to kill white people. And he gave the order, kill all white people. If we started the Nat Turner story from there, I think everybody would say something is seriously awry. Like, shouldn't you first mention that Nat Turner was a slave? Isn't that the point of departure? That a human being was born into slavery? That human being was born into, was living in, and was certainly going to die in slavery. The Civil War didn't come till 30 years later. So I think it's as absurd to begin with October 7th as it, and not mention the conditions that preceded it, as to begin a story about Nat Turner without mentioning he was a slave.
So I agree with most of what both of you have said. I guess I'll play devil's advocate here. As folks who listen to me on Bad Faith know, I have expressed some ambiguity. I've been dealing with some internal conflict about how to reckon with Zohran as a phenomenon. I can't quite get past discomfort with our kind of collective willingness on the left to sort of soften our critique or to not nitpick, to use one of the terminology one of you brought up earlier, because of how close we feel to getting a real win in Zohran becoming mayor of New York. And part of my discomfort lies in the fact that Zohran is only as close he is to being mayor of New York because he was full-throated in his defense of what you might describe as more marginal aspects of, or marginal rhetoric, or like lefty rhetoric around Palestine that was less substantive. Of course, I'm referring to the brouhaha around the phrase globalized intifada. And there's something a little unsettling to me that the higher he is up in the polls, the farther he is past actually having won the primary, the closer he is to the finish line, and the less likely it is that he will be deterred by any sort of political smear campaign. It seems we're more and more likely to accept what I can't help but feel like is a kind of retrenchment from him and the forcefulness with which he defends the movement, the pro-Palestine movement. And the last thing about that I would say is that as he defended Palestine and advocated for Palestine in the course of the primary election, I really credit him for moving the goalpost, for expanding the Overton window, because he did double down on certain kinds of language. He didn't do what the Democrats are frequently doing with Trump and what they're doing right now with Trump, which is to constantly chase him to the right. And then the discourse all becomes around this reactive, we hate immigrants more, trust us kind of discourse instead of defining their own narrative. Zohran said, no, I'm not going to Israel. I'm running for mayor of New York. Zohran says, I respect the movement and people among the movement who want to say globalize the intifada, even if that's language I've not personally used. And he went on the front foot versus the back foot and radically changed, I would argue, how you're able to do politics in New York. They spent millions and millions of dollars on an Israel-based smear campaign against him that didn't work. And so consequently, they had to pivot in the general election. So I guess I will put to you both, I mean, do you have any concern about where you will draw the line as where he can flip? How far can he moderate his language on this or other issues? Because there was also the defund the police statement saying, I don't actually think the NYPD is racist. How far are we willing to let this go before we object?
Yeah, I mean, again, I see absolutely nothing wrong with, for example, acknowledging that civilians were killed on October 7th. It's all about the framing, as Norm, I think, explained so cogently. The issue is this statement a marker of backsliding, if you will? Is Zohran Mamdani on the Shabana Mahmood course, the UK, the justice minister in Britain, who in 2014 was marching in pro-Palestine marches during Operation Protective Edge, and is now locking up pensioners and invalids because they're holding signs opposing genocide, and has stated she wants to go even further. I think the concerns are that Zohran Mamdani feels he has to make the wrong compromises with the wrong people in order to succeed. And I don't know enough about him or New York politics or what's going to happen to give a clear opinion on that. So I will just, look at it in terms of how incredibly far we have gotten, that we're now discussing a statement that would have been entirely inconceivable even a few years ago, and to express the hope and I think also belief that yes, he's certain to make statements and compromises that we may find repulsive, but I don't see him headed in the direction of a Shabana Mahmood, and I hope I'm not wrong on that score.
What if there's something Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Norm. I'm sorry.
Yeah. From my point of view, I don't particularly care whether the language is incendiary, provocative, or the opposite, relatively innocuous, the phraseology. I'm concerned about the principles that are at stake. So allow me to give an illustration. When the issue of the intifada came up, I would much prefer if, instead of Zohran Mamdani saying that after the meeting with the business leaders, I will discourage use of that phrase. I think a real leftist politician, which Mr. Mamdani claims to be, and I have no reason to doubt it at this point. He comes from a radical pedigree. I knew his father, and his father was principled. I would rather if he had said, well, what's wrong with globalize the intifada? What does intifada mean? And use it as a teaching moment to say, actually, and Mouin can correct me on this, when the term was first coined, it meant, it literally means, the dictionary definition means for a dog to shake off its fleas.
Hmm.
When it was
Or
first,
just to shake off.
yeah, and it meant in 1988, or to be precise, December 7th, 1987, when the first Intifada began, it meant that Palestinians were shaking out of their slumber. That's what it meant. And in the first Intifada, it was wholly nonviolent on the Palestinian side. On the Israeli side, it was Defense Minister Rabin, who eventually won the Nobel Prize, who launched what was called back then the force, might, and beatings
Break their
policy.
bones.
Now, I was just going to get to that because, Brianna, you're too young to know. Mouin lived there then. He was the director of the main human rights organization.
I was a
Research.
researcher, not the director.
His name is, it was Al Haq.
Hmm.
And so he knows if you went into a city then, you saw a lot of children with casts. Casts. Their bones were broken. That was the real first intifada. Now, I agree the second intifada was violent. I don't think it's remembered how it became violent. It became violent when the first week the prime minister of Israel then was Ehud Barak, and he gave the order. The second intifada began just like the first intifada. It was nonviolent. He gave the order to violently repress it, to, so to speak, nip it in the bud.
1,000,000 bullets in the first
That's
few
what I was
days.
going to get to. Within 3 to 4 days, within 3 to 4 days of the second intifada, the Israeli army acknowledged having fired 1 million bullets. Or as one person said, I'm quoting him now, 1 bullet for every child, Israeli, 1 bullet for every child in Palestine, because it was West Bank and Gaza. So had he used that controversy as a teaching moment, then I feel he's fulfilling the function of a leftist. There's a second point. I do not believe he emphasized the critical fact that that is free speech, globalized the intifada. And I'm going to give you now a reference from 2 weeks ago. So as you know, the Eastern District judge, Judge Young, he delivered a 161-page decision on key people, on Mahmoud Khalil and the others who were rounded up. And just to give you an example of what a teaching moment is, Young said, Judge Young, who by the way was a Reagan appointee, and he ended his 161-page opinion praising Reagan and quoting him. So we're not talking about a left-wing judge appointed by, say, Obama.
Mm-hmm.
So what did he say? He said, number one, under our Constitution, non-citizen immigrants have the right to free speech. They have the right to free speech. Number two, he said, none of their speech crossed any lines. And I think my memory is, but I could be mistaken. I read it twice, but my memory isn't what it used to be. I think he pointed specifically to globalize the Intifada, among other things. He said that's free speech. Then he said the way the ICE people put on the masks, you know what he said? He said that was terrorizing.
Mm.
Terrorizing, that's the word he used. Terrorizing the pro Hamas, anti Israel people who were arrested. And then you know what he said? He said they were the ICE people. He said, and now I'm using his exact words again, they were cowardly desperados reminiscent of the Ku Klux Klan.
Mm.
That's what he said.
Because
Now,
the Gestapo don't wear masks.
yes, he focused on the masks issue. That's true. That's exactly correct. So had Mamdani used the globalized intifada to give a little history lesson, you could have done it briefly. And most important, give a constitutional lesson. You could say, I don't particularly like that phrase, but let's not forget our Supreme Court has ruled over and over and over again that is protected speech. Period. Full stop. That is protected speech. Again, it would have been a learning moment, and that's what I think the left is supposed to do.
Yeah,
It's supposed to, as
Can
Roosevelt
I just
reported, the job of the left is always two things: organize and educate. Organize and educate. Those are the signposts for a leftist. And I think he could have used the opportunity to educate. As he's organizing, also educate.
Mouin?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to make a brief comment. I don't disagree with a word either of you have said, even if I question to what extent a teaching moment, as I think Norm so aptly put it, can be organized in the context of the final weeks of this election, where the array of forces out to trip up Mamdani by any and all means is really something to behold. I think the
Mouin.
underlying issue is quite simple. Our
Mhm.
fear that we're going to sacrifice real change to receive a few moldy crumbs. I think that's really what this entire discussion is about. From I'm not in New York. I'm not voting in this election. From what I've seen, this remains a cause of real change and not one of a few crumbs from the table. But that's just my personal view, and I think
So let
that's
me,
really what the
yeah.
discussion is about.
So I think that is an important point you just bring up, Mouin, but that is exactly why I feel the way I do, because
Hmm.
it's not even close. The idea that we are trading off sloganeering or grandstanding or having a teaching moment against the possibility of quote unquote real change if Mamdani wins, I said I think a false comparison. The reality is, I just pulled up the New York Times, New York City mayoral polls, the latest polls. They range from Mamdani being up 20 as of, no, the highest one is he's up 26 according to a Zenith research poll, and the closest poll has him at up 8. But honestly, the average is hovering around high teens, right? With weeks left to go. And that has been an incredibly stable number, not to mention the fact that his polls are fortified by the same thing that his primary victory was fortified by, which is tens of thousands of volunteers who he still has at his disposal to turn people out and actually have the organizing grist for a win, unlike what Andrew Cuomo has. So I don't take on one end that there's the risk to Mamdani not being mayor, I think lies elsewhere outside of electoral control. The upside of the teaching moment, I think, is significant because there are many on the left who believe that, frankly, it's next to impossible, if not totally impossible, to operate as a person of conscience within the Democratic Party. And the most you have the thing that you have, the benefit that accrues from running within the party is in fact these teaching moments. The Bernie campaigns are, I think, instructive.
I'll agree with that.
Many of us are very frustrated with who Bernie, the way that he rolled over and who he ultimately became. And I'm saying that as literally his national press secretary in 2020. That being said, do I think it was wrong for him to have run? Do I regret him running those races? Do I regret my own participation? No, because I personally was radicalized by his 2016 race and went on to exceed, become more left than him in my politics, as did so many others in this space. And I think Zohran has the same potential to have that radicalizing force. I was eating at a Palestinian restaurant earlier today. I was reading there in preparation for an upcoming episode, and I listened to this woman plop down next to me with her falafel sandwich, saying, "Oh, I'm so glad to be in a liberal city. It's so nice to be here. I'm such a liberal, and it's nice to be here." And, me as a leftist, I'm kind of bristling, like, ugh. You're at this Palestinian spot where lefties, not liberals. But then I had to remind myself there are people who consider themselves liberals who are being radicalized by the issue of Palestine, who don't know the jargon enough to refer to themselves not as a liberal in a way that makes us
and
cringe.
even centrists now.
Yes. Sorry, I'm going on and on. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, why not? Why wouldn't he act boldly in this moment?
Listen, number one, Bernie did something spectacular in that election. He used every opportunity he had to call out the billionaire class, to call out Big Pharma, to call out Goldman Sachs by name. That because Bernie's an old-fashioned socialist. I'm not saying I agree with all his politics, but he knows the tradition. The tradition is in his bones. We used to say, Communist Party runs candidates in an election. Everyone runs candidates in an election. But what we understood was running a candidate meant you use the election cycle to educate. And Bernie was doing that to the hilt. He introduced a totally new vocabulary to 95% of Americans, to go out every campaign and talk about the billionaire class, those crooks, Big Pharma, a bunch of crooks. There had never, I'm older than both of you by far, maybe by both of you combined. There was never in the campaign in the United States of America where on national television, never, we heard language like that. It was unheard of in our country.
Not even Kamala?
Who?
The most aggrieved woman in the United States of America, who we're all supposed to be mourning.
107 days too many. Isn't that the name of her book? So I agree with Brianna. If you're a person of the left, you don't miss an opportunity to educate. On the other hand, I'm going to give you one caveat. The caveat is, I think Curtis Lewa is going to drop out. Mm-hmm. Somebody said he'll flip on a ham sandwich. Mark Lamont said that to me, and I thought it was a good line. He's just waiting to see the most he can get. Maybe he can get a ham and a pastrami sandwich. So he's holding out.
You really think that's true? Because I've seen people resurface all of these old clips of him showing kind of a surprising amount of integrity.
Sorry, Brianna.
No?
Next, you're going to be singing the praises of Al Sharpton.
You've seen the clips.
They were a duo in our country. Our city. Al Sharpton and Curtis Lewa. They were like a comedy act.
Tell me about it. Because you certainly have a much better sense of who he is. He's just sort of popping onto my radar now. But just for folks who haven't,
he began his career setting fire to a token booth. He said and then claimed that it was there was a fire. You know how Al Sharpton began his career? It was at Erasmus Hall High School. He was in Erasmus Hall High School. He had a raffle. He had a raffle. I guess he was like some student leader. And he was raffling off what back then was a portable television. Guess who won the raffle?
Al Sharpton.
Curtis Sliwa.
That's how it began. You know, he was wired by the FBI. He was a skunk.
An informant. Okay, counterpoint.
Okay,
just so
okay,
people know that.
I don't want to get.
No, but let me just say what has happened so far. What has happened?
I think that if Curtis Sliwa drops out, it is going to be close.
Right, but the thing is, I just got to get this on the record, Norm. I just got to get this out. What has happened so far is that while I did not doubt that Eric Adams was going to drop out because he is a known corrupt person who takes bribes, Curtis Sliwa has in fact exposed folks saying the Cuomo campaign has been offering to pay all these New York millionaires have been offering me to pay me off, and God darn it, I'm not going to do it. So you think all of that is bravado? I'm sorry?
He wants more.
You think all of that is just signaling I have a higher price?
Curtis Sliwa has a long history, and it's not even ugly. It's just funny. I mean, the guy is what? He's 70 years old, and he's still wearing his brownie beret.
Look, he's got to look. I think you got to give it to him for being iconic enough to sort of be on people's radars. He's probably more recognizable than Cuomo is at this point. So look, branding is branding. But look, okay. The secondary point to Curtis Sliwa is that I don't actually think if he drops out, it necessarily. I mean, again, I have to look at the polling, but he's got such a narrow slice of the electorate anyway. That I don't think it makes a difference.
15%.
I'm sorry?
It's about 15%. Sliwa is polling between 11 and 15%.
Let's see. Let me just pull it up. Here's a Newsweek piece from 3 years ago called Zohran Mamdani's odds of winning NYC mayoral race hit new high. Let me scroll down to the part about Curtis. You know, fun Curtis story. I joined a run club. I have trouble remembering people's names who I meet. I met a guy named Curtis, and I immediately go, "Oh, Curtis, like Curtis Sliwa." And he goes, "Who?" And I'm like, "The guy running for mayor of New York." And he's like, "I would have gone with like Curtis Mayfield." And I'm like, "Yes, that was a normal thing to say. Sorry, I'm politics brained." Okay, this piece says about Sliwa that he holds less than 1%.
No, that's
sorry. He says Sliwa has less than 1% chance of winning. Sorry, that's what it is. Sorry, wait a minute. Okay, Columbia University professor Robert Y. Shapiro was asked if Sliwa potentially dropping out would help Cuomo. He asked if Sliwa drops out, his voters are likely to want to vote against Mamdani, who has been amply demonized as too far extreme, Marxist/communist/socialist, and who has supported defunding the police, a policy totally at odds with the gung-ho law and order support of Sliwa's Republican and anti-crime followers. It doesn't say how much. It doesn't say how much it would make a difference.
Just Ms. Brianna.
Yes.
Can you just Google what is Curtis Sliwa currently polling?
I'm trying.
It's a very sad day when I have to give instruction. I'm
telling you, these are like the original article I was reading the Zohran polls from says it's all the polls, but Sliwa's not included in theirs.
Mm-hmm. No, I followed it very closely. It's between 11 and 15. I don't think he's got it sewn up yet, Mamdani.
This NBC News article also doesn't have Sliwa's percentage.
All right, I'm going to do something.
Here we go. Maybe this Emerson polling site. Wait a minute. Sorry to 7%. But this was before. I think this was from before Adams dropped out. Yeah, this is from before Adams dropped out. So that's not that helpful. Okay, I'm going to move on from this. But I still, given that Mamdani is 20 points up, am skeptical.
Okay, I'm just looking now. The latest polls. Sliwa is exactly as I said. He's polling between 11 and 15. Well, now 11 and 17. So I do not believe it's sewn up, but that's for another day.
Okay. All right. And the last button I'll put on this is that even if like there are many people who believe, I mean, like the argument sort of that we had coming out of the Bernie moment was basically if you make it in, if you make it through AOC style, it's because you bent the knee and you're kind of not worth it anymore. Your value was in exposing the limits of the Democratic Party, and the second you start to try to fit in to win, they've already won because there's no end to that. So what do you say to the argument that at best we'll have an AOC style mayor, which for sure is better than the alternative in Cuomo, but is hardly the kind of revolutionary voice that people are hoping for?
I think it's too soon to call. I think, as anybody who knows politics understands, the real trouble begins. I mean, the real struggle, forget trouble, the real struggle begins the day he wins.
That's
If
when the compromises become meaningful.
Well,
All right.
that's when the screws are going to be turned.
That too.
And they're
Well, I
going to
hope
make sure they have to convey the lesson. Exactly, by the way, since we're on the subject of Israel and Palestine, exactly what happened in January 2006 when Hamas won the election. And that was not the party that was supposed to win. And so, beginning with Israel, then the US, and then the EU, they all turned the screws to make sure the Hamas experiment failed and to turn the population against Hamas in the expectation they would overthrow the government or rid themselves of Hamas. Hamas they didn't run on jihad in 2006. They didn't run on destroying the state of Israel. They ran on a very simple, modest platform of reform,
Development and change.
development, and change. The Palestinian Authority was and still is a lethal combination. It's hopelessly corrupt and hopelessly incompetent. And Hamas had a reputation back then because of the charitable organizations that it ran, and because there was integrity there. By the way, you know what's the best book on that particular chapter in the history of Hamas? Nobody cites it. It's Sarah Roy's book. Sarah Roy wrote a book. Sarah Roy of Harvard. She's at the Harvard Middle East Center. She wrote a book describing Hamas. I think it was like the 1990s. It was before 2006. And what she showed was they were reasonably honest, competent organization running various charities and Islam related institutions. And that's why they won. But that's not allowed to happen. You see, it's the same thing with Zohran Mamdani. As one real estate developer put it, New York is the capital of world capitalism. That's what he said. We're not having a socialist mayor. So you will never be able to placate or appease the other side unless the leper changes its spots. So they will do to Mamdani on a different kind of level what the U.S. and Israel did to Hamas. They said
And the Europeans.
And the Europeans and the EU. They said literally, because we have, through the miracle of WikiLeaks, we have the memoranda. We are going to keep the Gaza economy on the precipice. So they said, we're not going to have outright starvation. We will have a humanitarian minimum. No chocolate, no potato chips, no baby chicks, no cinnamon, no condiments. So we're going to make life as miserable as possible so that the people of Gaza will overthrow Hamas or get rid of them in another election. And that's going to be the same thing that's going to happen with Zohran Mamdani. The struggle begins on day one.
Well,
Because the banks will start manipulating the money, the real estate developers will start doing their tricks, and they will try to run the city into the ground to transmit the message, we are in charge.
And they'll have the support of the Democratic establishment.
Right. And they've already been doing it. And they've and they tried that during the primary, and Zohran still won, not backing down. So that is the point. I won't reiterate it. I already said what I said. But all of that, I agree with all of that, which begs the question, why switch strategies now when it's been a winning strategy? Okay, and when in all likelihood, you won't be allowed to accomplish anything because you're up against this whole Democratic Party, but your voice and your message is what does resonate.
Listen, I don't totally agree with that. I am,
what aspect of it?
People claim I'm a voice of doom, but I'm not. Because, yes, they have the money, for sure. They have the media, for sure. They have the institutions, for sure. But there's one thing they don't have. They don't have the numbers. The numbers are on our side.
Okay, I'm gonna get off this, I swear. But the whole point of he has the numbers because he was so inspiring and not backing down on these issues.
I agree with that.
It's like I just don't. I agree with all of that, but then I draw the exact opposite conclusion.
I get it. Not the exact opposite. Brianna, one of the things about listening to you debate Charlie Kirk, which was very refreshing, was you were not dogmatic. When the whole issue of immigration came up with Kirk, and he thought he was going to, Mouin,
I think you maybe meant to mute yourself due to the car sounds, but you've turned off your camera as well. I'm not sure if that was intentional.
Yeah, okay. So I just wrote you a message. I'll be back in
okay. My apologies.
Okay. One of the things that was refreshing was like when the immigration issue came up, you just very calmly said, well, I think there are arguments on the other side. I see it. You weren't afraid. You didn't feel like this need to.
You feel like I'm being dogmatic right now?
I don't see it as an either or issue. I see arguments on your side, and I thought Mamdani was, and here I agreed with what's the young woman's name from Washington State. You have her on your program. The city council. Yeah. I think she was right. You're never going to win over those people. You're wasting your time. When he goes to the meetings with the business leaders, who are you trying to persuade?
Well, then help me understand, Norm, how.
I think those are efforts.
I don't think it's either. Like, I'm not sitting here saying, people are tweeting right now. Mamdani's a sellout. I told you so. Yada yada. I'm not doing that, right? Like, so I kind of push back against the idea that I'm saying it's a black or white issue. I hope to be wrong, but what I am pointing out is that I do feel like there's an inconsistency between how we talk about what we learned from Bernie, how we talk about what we learned from the squad, how we talk about the limits of working within the Democratic Party. What you've just said so articulately about the value of running within the Democratic Party as a kind of messaging pulpit and these teaching moments that are possible. The recognition that Zohran got to where he is by not backing down, his advantage in the polls, all of that to me just sits very awkwardly with the sort of acceptance of his retrenchment at this moment. And I personally don't believe, all I'm saying is that I don't believe the polls validate the shift. That's a subjective empirical question. So fine. My view is that the polls don't warrant it, especially because all evidence to me up until this point points to him being more successful the more he doubles down. And I would also take the Trump example and throw that in the mix. That Donald Trump, I think if he's taught us nothing, is that creating your own media cycle as opposed to always playing defense and reacting to what the other side says about you creates a sort of Teflon shield around you that he's coasted on to great success as he's now breaking apart the government. Perhaps this is a good time to play this for you and move on from the subject while Mouin is away, because I know that you've spoken about this or tweeted about this recently, and I want to get your response to this particular video involving Van Jones, and I want to place it in the context of a broader conversation about how far we've come in terms of media commentary and where the sort of political discourse is about Gaza today versus 2 years ago, and how this video is perhaps a counterexample of some movement that I do that we have observed during that time. For folks who haven't watched it, let's just watch it briefly.
Isn't part of that because we had to fold everything into critical race theory, and somehow the Middle East became part of, you know?
I see it differently, and I love this conversation because I think people, those of us who went to college, give a lot more credit to college courses for how the world works than I do. This is not about critical race theory on college campuses. This is about Iran. Iran and Qatar have come up with a disinformation campaign that they are running through TikTok and Instagram that is massive. If you are a young person, you open up your phone and all you see is dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby,
right.
Diddy, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby. Like, that's basically your whole feed. So that's not DEI. That is a geopolitical adversary that is deliberately trying to divide the West against itself.
That view is not.
Okay. I was struck by that for two reasons. One, it's craven, crass, base, low, and inhumane. But also, it was jarring in the context of a media environment that has in the last month or so had to recognize a humanitarian crisis. You saw this starting over the summer with a recognition of famine, even by mainstream centrist Zionist news outlets, followed by a recognition in some quarters, including by Bernie Sanders, finally, that it was in fact a genocide on the heels of the UN having made that assessment. And in that context, which is a long ways from where we were this time 2 years ago, this statement feels particularly galling, and I think is why we got an apology, an empty, in my view, apology from Van Jones, but apology nonetheless. And I wonder what the two of you make of this moment and what it means about where we are as a public and as a kind of a mainstream, through a mainstream media lens, in our understanding of and ability to talk about what's going on in Gaza. I'll start with you, Mouin.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that on the key issue, not only did Jones not offer an apology, he in fact doubled down. He did acknowledge using what he calls dead Palestinian baby as a punchline. But the reason that he had repeated it so many times was because of his absurd claim that the only reason people are seeing this on their social media feed is because Iran is somehow controlling and Qatar are somehow controlling the dissemination of information in the United States. Because of course, you know, Israel has absolutely no influence on media or social media in the U.S. And when he offered his apology, in which he didn't name Israel, he explained once again, you know, the reason I said this was to highlight the role that foreign countries, not Israel clearly, are playing in controlling our media environment. So in fact, he doubled down. And to me, this just demonstrates the absolute desperation that Israel and its lackeys like Van Jones are in. You know, they can shoot as many messengers as they want, and they have literally shot hundreds of messengers in Gaza, but they're at a loss of how to suppress the message. You know, they've tried Pallywood, they've tried dead Palestinian baby, they've tried, I think it was Pelosi said it's China, now it's Iran and Qatar, Al Jazeera, and all the rest of it. And the message just keeps getting stronger and stronger and more difficult to ignore, so that, Israel's lackeys have to engage in this kind of morbid theater on frat boy Bill Maher's show, and it backfires.
Not to mention, of course, buying TikTok and installing Bari
Yes.
Weiss ahead
I-
of
Precisely.
yes.
I was going to comment on that. First of all, let's do a simple thought experiment. What if Van Jones had said that, why do we keep hearing about dead babies on October 7th? Why do we keep hearing about what happened on October 7th, when we have a genocide for the last 2 years? Why do we keep hearing about it?
Mm.
Well,
Who's Van Jones?
so isn't it because the Zionists control the media? Isn't that why, in the face of this genocide, we keep hearing about what happened on October 7th? Why is it that we keep hearing about this Israel-Hamas war? There's no war in Gaza. On average now, as of now, about one Israeli soldier gets killed every 4 days. That's the average. One every 4 days. About 75 Gazans get killed every day. That's the average. So you have about roughly 1 to 225. Does 1 to 225 sound like a war? Does it sound like a genocide? That's itself a simple question. Why do we keep hearing about Israel-Hamas war? Well, I think it's because the Jews control the media. Imagine if he had said that. Would he last one day? Or would he be finished in the blink of an eye? They say he issued an apology. Okay, he issued an apology. As Mouin will remember, about 30 years ago now already, so Jesse Jackson, at one point, he whispered to somebody, it was not public, he referred to New York City as Town. Okay?
84.
84, right. So it's 40 years now. Yeah, Town. Now, let me tell you, for the next 2 years, Jesse Jackson issued more apologies for that statement than I have hairs in my chest. Did that get him anywhere? It just, they hounded him and hounded him and hounded him. And now Van Jones gets a pass from the establishment.
He's going to get a promotion.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the first point. The second point is maybe the reason there's so much talk about dead babies, Mr. Jones, is that if you look at the statistics, Israel has killed more children in Gaza. Believe it or not, you ready for this? In the first month than all the other war zones in the world combined for 3 years. Do you hear that? Maybe that's why we hear so much about dead children in Gaza. Do you know a UN report showed, listen to this, it's a statistic that it's hard to get your mind around. Every day, 10 children in Gaza have one or both of their legs amputated. Every day. I mean, that statistic actually, it kind of riveted me. Every day, 10 children have one or both of their legs amputated in Gaza, a large number of them without anesthetics. Maybe that's why we hear so much about Gaza, the children in Gaza. Not Qatar, not Iran, because there's something so unspeakable that has been unfolding there for the past 2 years. You can't begin to grasp the number of just raw data, statistics that place Gaza in a category so totally its own that in some statistics, it exceeds horrors going back to World War II, like Dresden. There are some factual data that puts Gaza in this totally distinct category. Number of journalists killed. There's just nothing anywhere like it. Nothing. But no, it's all an Iran-Qatar conspiracy. And that just brings us to the last point. People on the left are often accused of economic reductionism, or they call it vulgar Marxism. And my old friend who we knew, Alex Coburn, he was a radical journalist, he once said, I think vulgar Marxism is a good place to begin. These people are all bought off. They're all bought off. Van Jones rakes in the cash. Don't tell me, because I'm not going to believe it, that he wears that yellow ribbon without being paid. I don't believe it. I think he's paid. Why would anyone wear that? A black man. Why are you wearing the yellow ribbon? No. It's one of the things, because before the program began, one of the things I mentioned to Brianna was there are so many aspects that have revealed themselves in the past 2 years. And one of the more recent aspects is how many quote unquote social media influencers are being paid, and being paid big bucks. We're talking about the Jewish supremacist billionaire class who are paying very big bucks. And even, when I was on with Mouin and we debated Professor Benny Morris and something called Destiny, and it later came out, I have a friend, I can't name him, who by sheer coincidence had a very intimate connection, personal connection with that thing called Destiny. And he said, this is what he told me. And after the show, I could send you the email because we had recent correspondence about it. When the whole issue came up of Bill Ackman, the Jewish supremacist billionaire who met all these influencers in the Hamptons. And he wrote to me, this friend, he said, Destiny was coached for about 6 months, and he was paid, quote, he was paid handsomely by a Israeli advocacy organization. Whether Lex Fridman was in it as well, I am not certain. As you know, Lex Fridman is the most revolting lickspittle. No, he's a revolting lickspittle. Have you ever seen this interview he did with Bill Ackman?
No.
Where Fridman is at MIT, which is where Ackman's wife is. Okay? Ackman's wife is a former Israeli pilot. I don't think we need further commentary on that. I think a captain, by the way. And so she's at MIT. And Fridman is saying to Ackman, did you see this, Mouin?
No, I didn't.
Oh, your wife. how much I learned from her, how smart she is, how brilliant she is. It was
Well, she shares out Wikipedia connection with the thing.
yeah. That's another thing.
Wait, this is
So
the one who plagiarized?
yeah, so Claudine Gay, she loses her job. I didn't agree with you at the time, but then later I thought you were right when you had those arguments with Ronnie Suave, who, by the way, hailed today Bari Weiss being the head of CBS.
Don't tell me that. I don't even want to know that.
Yeah.
Don't make
And
me angry.
I thought to myself, I'm so glad Brianna's out of that place. Okay. So,
You're still watching, Norm.
no, I just get it. People send me emails. I don't watch it. So he said, Claudine Gay, she plagiarized, it was so trivial. But even if she plagiarized serious scholarly journals. Ackman's wife, who has her PhD from MIT, for her doctoral thesis, she plagiarized Wikipedia. She's on Destiny's category, level. No, but here's the point.
Mm-hmm.
The point is, the money is everywhere. It was money that ousted Claudine Gay. It was the threats, first by Bill Ackman, and then he organized, you'll probably remember, all the Jewish alumni at Harvard. There was 1,200 alumni signed this thing about the anti-Semitism at Harvard. I'm going to tell you an anecdote now. You'll just have to take my word based on my track record, because I can't tell you where I heard it. Okay?
Okay.
Elizabeth McGill, who was fired from U of P.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I have a friend who knows her. I don't want to give more details because it would get him in trouble. But he expressed his sympathy when she lost her job. And you know what the 2 words she uttered to him were? I'm going to tell you. 2 words. Money talks.
Speaks loudly.
Money talks.
It's interesting.
And it's everywhere. That's Van Jones. As I posted today, and I'm not given to this, but it got to me. I said, it perplexes why Van Jones is wearing a pimp's blazer when he's obviously a high-priced call girl.
But do you know he's high-priced?
Yeah, I think so. Remember, he got $100 million from Jeff Bezos. It's for the billionaire class. It's an insurance policy. That's why Bezos gave Obama $100 million, because if there's an Amazon strike, we know where Obama will be, as in out of sight.
Norm, I saw some people on the internet doubting that you had actually written that tweet. And I would like you to just say again for the record that was all you.
That was me.
I never doubted it for a second.
It felt very on brand to me.
Emma Goldman famously said, if I can't dance, I don't want your revolution. And Norman Finkelstein says, if I can't laugh, I don't want your revolution. No, my late mother used to lament. She said, Norman, it's a problem when you're the only one laughing at your jokes. So I agree. But so long as other people laugh, there's no problem.
Norman, you are hilarious. Many people laugh. I can't do a live stream with you or mention you on a stream without somebody talking about Mr. Botticelli, that thing called Destiny, Mr. Brunelleschi, whatever on earth you called him.
You'll never live that down.
You know the story. When the program was over, So Mouin and I walked downstairs. Actually, we walked down with
Morris.
Benny Morris, and the refuse was left behind. He came later. But Mouin, Mouin is he's a gentleman. He is. You don't know Mouin, but he comes from classy pedigree. My parents were classy too. I didn't inherit it. Mouin inherited it. And so when we were in the middle of the debate, Mouin, there was a break. There was a break. So Mouin and I go downstairs because Mouin wants to smoke. And he wants to gently convey a message to me. So he says, Norman, if you keep insulting him that way, we might come across as elitist. So I'm thinking, Mouin, I don't care how we come across. This guy is not walking out like he's a heavyweight. So that was the break. Then on the way out at the end, when Benny Morris had departed, Mouin says to me, Norman, that was pretty funny the way you kept calling him different names. I said, Mouin can confirm this because he's here. I said, Mouin, what are you talking about?
Yeah, you didn't even know.
I had no idea. I had no idea. The expression of the younger generation, that guy triggered me. That guy triggered me. I didn't know. I admitted on your program when we talked about it, I was out of control. So it turns out, but it's an important point. Now we're laughing, and I always like to laugh, because the world's such a horrible place. I like to laugh. But Brianna, Mouin, just look at it. Look at the pattern. 3 presidents deposed. Money. Van Jones. Money. That thing called destiny. Money. It's everywhere. It's everywhere, contaminating the political discourse. Take the case. No, really. I'm dead serious about this because people don't.
I just want to say.
Just allow me one last example, and I want to hear you out, Mouin. Everybody talks about affirmative action for Black people. Affirmative action for Black people, right? Affirmative action is terrible because of Black people. Now you take this bovine, Bari Weiss. Okay? No, really. How did she get her job? She's such a complete imbecile. I had the misfortune of reading her. It wasn't a book, it was a comic. A comic. How did she get it? Isn't that Jewish supremacist affirmative action? Isn't that the only reason? That Matt Taibbi, okay, I don't want to lose my thought. That Matt Taibbi, he said everybody's jealous of Bari Weiss. She busted her ass at Wire, and now she got a job at CBS. She busted her ass. And I'm thinking to myself, A, Brianna Joy Gray doesn't bust her ass. Crystal Ball doesn't bust her ass.
Did you see Glenn comparing the hit?
Only Bari Weiss. Bari Weiss busted her ass? No. Bari Weiss got the backing of all these billionaires. She didn't bust her ass.
And it's the same with the Charlie Kirk hagiography, by the way. Everyone is erasing all the billionaire backing. Yeah.
I remember one time you said, in a quiet sort of way, you said, not in an aggressive way, you said, he isn't a good debater. That's correct. It's all the money bags. And then Bari Weiss, she just gets the money because she's a Jewish supremacist. That's the only reason. Competence? No. I'll just read you. from that comic that she wrote. This is how she ends the book, referring to Jews.
Yeah.
We are a people descended from slaves who brought the world ideas that changed the course of history. One God, human dignity, the sanctity of life, freedom itself. This is our inheritance. This is our legacy. We are the people commanded to bring light into this world. And now you're just waiting for, Israel Uber alles. That's the only reason she got the job. But that's not called affirmative action. That's not called affirmative action. It's all the money. And you're not allowed to say it. You know why you're not allowed to say it? I'm going to tell you. You know why you're not allowed to say it?
Why?
You're not allowed to say it because they say that's an anti-Semitic trope. It's an anti-Semitic trope that Jews have a lot of money and they control things. But you know what? You know why a cliche is a cliche? You know why a cliche is a cliche? Because most of the time it's true. That's what makes a cliche a cliche.
I'm
And there was a problem here with the money. There was a real problem. Now, you want to shy away from that problem? I'm not shying away from that problem. That's the problem with Van Jones. It's just a dollar sign. It's a dollar sign. The hunger increases with the eating. He got the 100 million from Bezos, and he gets money here and money there. That's why he does it. Vulgar Marxism? Sorry, I'm with Alex Coburn. Very good place to begin.
It's interesting that it seems like...
And that sack of shit, Matt Taibbi. Oh, she busted her ass. What about you, Brianna? You don't bust your ass?
You know how Matt Taibbi...
You actually prepare.
You know when
How many podcasters... No, seriously, Mouin. How many podcasters actually read books before
You'd be so proud of me. You'd be so proud of me today, Norm. I'm doing a review of the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie that's based off of a Pynchon novel, and I'm literally trying to get through these 400 pages before I talk about it tomorrow.
Joy Gray. And you ever see Crystal when she had to interview that guy from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? She just pulverized him.
Yeah, that was really great.
Pulverized him. Every 5 minutes, the guy grabbed the glass and started to drink because he didn't know what to do here. What to do? That's work.
Well, let's talk about this a little bit because
Did you see when Bari Weiss interviewed the Mossad?
I didn't watch it, but I saw about it.
Pretended she didn't know what it was?
Yeah. Like she's interviewing a Girl Scout. And the funniest, I have to say, somebody sent it to me, and I did put it on. That guy, Tom Dillon, is his name?
Mm-hmm. The comedian?
What's his name?
The comedian, Tim Dillon?
Yeah. He did a takeoff on that segment, which was so funny.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
You saw that?
Well,
yeah. It was so perfect. The innocent babe in the woods. What is the Mossad? So many people have so many strange ideas about it. What is the,
Can you confirm you don't do assassinations?
Wait, I think I have it here. Wait a minute. But while I pull it up, I do wonder what you guys both make of. So I was alluding earlier to the ways the media has changed. Obviously, there's the Bari of it all. There's the buying TikTok of it all. But that's a response, right, to the fact that they've been losing this battle. And interestingly, there have been so many sort of conservative coded figures like Dave Smith, like a lot of these conservative comedians, like Tim Dillon. I'm sorry?
Candace Owens.
They're now calling them the woke right in bad faith, obviously. But because of how many of them are in this group, Tucker Carlson even, who have come out as pro-Palestine, or at least sympathetic to Palestine and critical of Israel and its influence. And reportedly, we'll see what comes of this. That's the direction that Charlie Kirk was even going at the very end of his life. All that being said, I mean, does that give you, like, how do you feel about that? Does it give you any optimism? Do you think it's going to stick? Is it going to get to the point where it actually affects Trump's popularity when you see Andrew Schultz and all of these guys who had Trump on, and, you know, even right up to Joe Rogan now saying, gosh, this isn't what I voted for. I didn't think we were going to be pulling people off the streets into unmarked cars. I didn't think it was going to come down to this.
I didn't, by the way.
You agree?
I was wrong. Yeah, I was wrong.
Yeah.
I have no problem with saying when I'm wrong. The part with the ice, no, I was wrong. That really, it's horrifying. You know what shocked me the most?
What shocked you?
I didn't know ICE was all over college campuses. I did not know that. They're terrorizing the students, you know, the students on the campuses. And I want to just say that since, you know, we were going to discuss various aspects of the last 2 years, one of the things that struck me at the time after the Dred Scott decision, 1850, I think, after the Dred Scott decision, you know what happened in many cities, in all cities actually, in the North?
Sorry, that was that escaped slaves had to be returned?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, exactly. They formed, quote unquote, vigilance committees, the abolitionists and their allies, to protect the slaves who had escaped. And to my mind, that's the proper response on the college campuses. There should be groups being formed now, vigilance committees, to protect the students from these. You know what they used to call them? The slaveholders would send people over to capture the slaves, the slave catchers. And you know what the abolitionists called them? Frederick Douglass called them biped bloodhounds. Biped bloodhounds. That's how they should be treated. Coming up, and I have to say, I was deeply moved by that judge. Do you know what nerve? Well, he's 85, so he's on his way out in a literal sense. But you know what nerve it is to describe them as, quote, cowardly desperados? That's exactly right. The abolitionists were not afraid of saying that. They called them bloodhounds, except Douglass, because he was clever with words, obviously, but they were all clever with words. Just a very impressive bunch, my God, the level of erudition. You're going biped bloodhounds. That's what ICE is. That's what ICE is. So that part, no, I did not think that would happen. And now we're seeing a reaction, you know, in the various cities. But it's a very difficult moment. It's a very difficult moment, because how are the judges defending the states against the intrusion of the National Guard? The argument they're using is the situation is not out of control, because Trump says, you know, it's
not an emergency.
Right. So they're saying, well, it's only like 70 people outside the ICE headquarters. So now you have a problem. The problem is, if you try to escalate it, then the legal argument is lost, because then Trump can say it's an insurrection.
Well, this has been the long game coming. And whatever you think about the labels or jargon that are used by these movements, the bell that was being rung by the Black Lives Matter activists and the Stop Cop City activists was that they were expanding the police state and doing drills and building cities in preparation for the exact kind of crackdowns that are happening now. And the Stop Cop City movement was saying they're literally training these cops with Israeli methods, and you don't think that it's because we're about to be put under apartheid conditions? And all of the criminal penalties that have been ratcheted up for nonviolent protesters tying themselves to oil pipelines and throwing cans of soup, and the way that both liberal and conservative media have vilified those who block traffic as people who need to be run over with their cars and for whom you should show no sympathy. I think I said this on the podcast, so apologies for repeating myself, but I was watching the morning show on Apple TV. I don't recommend it, but it's like ostensibly a liberal program with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon. And there's a scene where Jennifer Aniston encounters some protesters that are blocking traffic, and the instinct of the show is to say, "Oh, these silly climate kids, don't they know I have an important meeting to get to?" And you've heard the rhetoric. Oh my God, what if an ambulance can't get to the hospital? The death will be on these people's hands. Not okay. Maybe these people wouldn't have to protest if we didn't have big oil killing our environment, killing indigenous people in the Amazon, committing all of the harms that we know result in real world death as well. So like we're being primed. They've been priming the pump for a very long time to cut us off at the pass. Keep to your protest zones, they say. I've been in these protests and you mill around the Washington Monument or whatever. And I think to myself, if these tens of thousands of people were to move into the street, maybe we'd be doing something. If we encircled an Amazon warehouse and the trucks couldn't come and go, maybe we'd be doing something. But I also understand the consequences of that. But when you have a movement with millions, sorry, go ahead, Mouin.
No, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, please go ahead. I'm going on.
I just wanted to make two brief points. The first is I think this reliance on the judiciary to stop the government, it's not going to get very far. As Norm was explaining, at some point they'll have the legal basis, or it'll get to the Supreme Court, which will rubber stamp whatever the government wants. So this kind of faith in the integrity and independence of the judiciary, I find quite scary.
Also because, just a brief mention, they also, I mean, we don't know what happened, but the South Carolina, that circuit court judge.
Yeah, her house burned down.
Had her house, I mean, who knows what happened, but her house is on fire. It burned down. So there's real world threats potentially. Yeah. I don't know. We don't know what happened yet. So people who would come down with these decisions. Yeah, go ahead.
The other issue you raised, Brianna, was about the divisions about Israel on the right. And what I find interesting there is on the left, clearly, it's been a response to the genocide and Israel's apartheid and so on. My sense of developments on the right is that it's quite different. That the difference is that many of these people, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, and many of these others have traditionally been very supportive of Israel. And even if they had misgivings about the Gaza genocide, they weren't particularly vocal about it. I think for them, the turning point, the last straw, if you will, was the war against Iran. It was then really that you began to see a very significant expansion in right-wing opposition to Israel that then spilled over into opposition to Israeli policy in Gaza. And from their point of view, the U.S., a government that proclaimed itself to be America first and non-interventionist, was being hoodwinked, dragged into prosecuting and funding an Israeli war. So rather than them seeing Israel as a U.S. proxy, they see the U.S. As an Israeli proxy. And it's very interesting, I think, to see this kind of split on the right, both in its own terms and because, of course, it's the core base of the current administration.
I think it's an important. Go ahead, Norm.
I want to just make one qualification, and I want to stipulate it's speculation, and I might be wrong, but I have concern that I might be right, which is in the real world, it's not been the left, it's been the right that's been tinged with the anti-Semitism.
Sure. Yeah.
Not just tinged.
That's what I was going to say as well.
It's a core. And I do believe, because I do listen to them, and I don't want to name names because I don't want to get involved in an internet war. That's just not my thing. I don't want to get involved in that, but there are several individuals who I've listened to. Their names came up in the conversation we've had this evening, who I have to say I am wary of some of the things they're saying and where it's coming from.
Mm.
And I'm going to leave it at that because everybody understands what I'm saying, and I'm not going to bother elaborating it.
Oh yeah, what I would add to that, I, yes, and I have noticed, like, for example, if you look at the text messages that allegedly Charlie Kirk exchanged with Candace Owens and others right before his death, it is this kind of sense of, I don't like being told what to do, combined with maybe
As if you don't
also,
have a choice.
right. Well, it's I don't know if you saw, maybe I'll pull them up and read them, but Charlie Kirk had allegedly money that was coming his way that was retracted because he had invited Tucker Carlson to this Turning Point USA conference. And then, like he was saying, and he was expressing, like, I don't like being told what to do. I don't like being manipulated in this way. And I think that can very easily be tinged with, or, you know, kind of amplified if you think the person telling you what to do is beneath you, or you're anti-Semitic, or, like, do you know what I mean? The idea that, like, now we're supposed to be America first. We're supposed to be Christian fundamentalists who were supporting Israel because it's politically convenient and because we need the red heifers to be there the day that Christ returns or whatever, but not because they're actually the chosen ones, or that we believe that they should be, you know, having influence over what we're doing. And he was expressing a frustration at the way money was talking in that situation.
Well, somebody,
Norm, if I can just,
I'm going to let you go, but somebody should have told Charlie Kirk the adage, "He who pays the piper calls the tune." It seems that despite all of his genius, he wasn't aware of that. Very fundamental. By the way, vulgar Marxist idea.
I just want to make a brief point that on the left, it's been kind of an article of faith that Israel and Jews are two very distinct issues. One is a political movement and an ideology and a state, and the other is a faith in a community, or however you want to define it, but that these are two distinct things. Israel, of course, maintains they're one and the same. On the right, much of the support for Israel traditionally has been on the basis that there's no distinction between Israel and Jews. I mean, think of Christian Zionists, for example. And now, just to echo Norm's point, if you look at some of the criticism of Israel emerging on the right, it also echoes this belief that you really can't distinguish between Israel and Jews. And that's, of course, worrisome, not only for obvious reasons, but also politically.
There's a problem there. And I will be, without saying more, we can talk about later, I will be on certain programs this coming week where that, to me, is an issue, a problem for me. Mm-hmm. I would just want to say, yeah, I know. I don't want to be sucked in by the system on any end of the spectrum. And I have to, remain true to my parents' legacy, which is the most important thing to me. And I don't want them to be ashamed of anything I say, even though they've long passed. But you get the idea. I would just want, on what you said, just to make 2 points, one very short and one a little bit longer. It's not just the right, as you said, as you pointed out, Mouin, it's also centrists have changed colors. I would have to say, probably, if we can talk about a silver lining in the horror of Gaza, and I don't believe there can ever be a silver lining in a genocide, that's also being faithful to my parents' memory. But if one were to conjure it, I would have to say, when Charlemagne the God christened Hakeem Jeffries Apak Shakur, that was one of the greatest moments in human history. You know, right up there with God giving Moses the tablets. Apex Shakur was just an act of total brilliance.
It was amazing.
Yes. That one is going to stick.
It's amazing. Only because I pulled it up earlier. I did want to see what you were talking about with this Tim Dillon. This is the interview. This is what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Here.
A lot of people on the internet believe that you are my boss because they believe that I am a member of the Mossad.
Oh,
but
really?
this is actually the first time that I'm meeting you, or at least as far as I know, any member of the Mossad. So I'm very excited to meet you.
I'm the first one you've ever met, but you know.
Wait, what was that, Norm?
How many paychecks did she get from him? She didn't have to meet him. She just has to go to her mailbox.
Oh, open the bank accounts.
Yeah.
Oh,
There might
that
be,
you
I might have met people.
Might be others that you know the world.
First, I want to set the table for people because the Mossad is an agency that is just shrouded in so much conspiracy and propaganda. Simple
Where could
question,
they have
Yossi.
gotten that idea?
What is the
Wait,
Mossad?
stop. Where could they
Ladies
have gotten that idea from? It must have been Iran and Qatar. It must have been Iran and Qatar. That's where they got the idea that the Mossad is shrouded in mystery. It's
Goddamn Al
just a
Jazeera.
It's just a Girl Scout group.
That's
Oh,
what
here.
Curtis Silva's hat's about.
No, watch this. Watch this.
Okay.
and gentlemen, welcome to the Tim Dillon Show. A friend of the show, Bari Weiss, did a fascinating interview with a member of the Mossad, and she really looked into the process, and it was incredibly interesting. So what I want to do now is I wanted to bring someone in to explore an area where I am completely clueless. I mean, completely in the dark. And I wanted somebody to kind of walk me through an area of study that I know nothing about, just like Barry did. So I want to thank you for coming, Chloe. You work at Dairy Queen.
That is true, yes.
What is Dairy Queen in your mind? What is it? Because people say that they serve ice cream there, and I'm not even super sure what that is.
What's ice cream?
Yeah, what is ice cream? Like, what is it?
Oh, it's like the frozen dessert ice cream.
Like a little treat.
It is a treat, yeah.
For like a frozen kind of it's like an ice.
It's sweet. It can be soft or hard. It's chocolate, vanilla.
And those are
the flavors.
Flavors.
Yeah.
So there's different flavors of ice cream.
There's many flavors of ice cream.
So that's something interesting to know too.
Sure, yeah.
Now, what is Dairy Queen to ice cream? What do they do?
Dairy Queen, it's a pretty popular franchise here in America. I'm pretty sure it's global, actually.
So it's an ice cream store.
Sure, yeah, we're known for that. We also sell like burgers, and
so if I wanted to, I could get ice cream at Dairy Queen.
Yes.
What would be some of the ice cream varieties at Dairy? What's a fun thing people like there?
Okay. I think we get the gist.
I think this is going to launch a whole new career for him when she's on CBS News.
I mean, it's outrageous. I mean, I saw Glenn Greenwald was lighting her up because he was pointing out that her big announcement on the Free Press's YouTube page had gotten like 18,000 hits in like 24 hours or something like that. I mean, there's just absolutely no traction there. I even saw, of all people, Faz Shakir, who was, Bernie's chief of staff campaign manager, doing a victory lap, talking about how he had grown More Perfect Union to having 200 million page views or whatever it is as compared to Free Press. So again, not to keep bringing up Matt Taibbi, but the idea that he would frame this as everybody jealous of how Bari Weiss has hustled, Bari Weiss has hustled and like built some institution for herself, when there's people like Crystal Ball out there who have built actually something real and huge and whose reach cannot be denied.
With no money.
Yes.
From hard work.
Yes.
from hard work. Maybe that's why people were a little pissed.
Or even Mehdi Hassan, there's no love lost between us, but I'm not going to deny that he is employing a lot of great journalists over at Zateo and doing real news.
I wanted just to return to one point. Again, since we're exploring different areas of the 2-year milestone, Mouin mentioned the point that it's a kind of mantra of the left to distinguish between the Jewish people and the state of Israel. And of course, that's a clouded issue because of the overwhelming support until recently that Jews have lent to Israel. So the distinction is not as clear cut in reality as it is said, as the left claims it is in theory. And there's a second area where I think leftist formulations, articles of faith of being a leftist, I just don't believe they're valid. And that's the question of, if you're a person of the left, you're always supposed to make the distinction between the state and the society, that the state acts in the interests of,
elites.
Whereas society, you're not supposed to blame society for the crimes of the state. We're always supposed to make that distinction. And as a young person, that was a tradition we inherited. That was a very important distinction to make. But I don't think it's valid in the case of Israel. What Israel has been carrying on in Gaza, it's not a state-sponsored project. It's a national project. It extends across the whole of Israeli society, from one end of the so-called political spectrum to the other. Israel doesn't even have a political spectrum. It has a right, a far right, and an ultra right. That's it. That's its whole spectrum. So, and I don't want to rehearse it because I've done it in so many interviews, but if you look at so much of the data, half of Israeli Jewish society supports the IDF committing genocide in Gaza. That's not an ambiguous formulation. It's like, well, what do they mean by genocide? It was spelled out in the question. Do you believe that the IDF, when it enters a Gazan city, should kill everybody? That was the wording of the question. Half of Israeli Jews said yes, 47%. A month later, the question was put, are there any innocents in Gaza? 62% of Israelis in total said no. If you factor away or factor out non-Jewish Israelis, because 20% of Israelis non-Jewish, it's about between 70 and 75%. If I were to fault Bernie Sanders in the last year and a half for one thing, it's that he tries to play it politically safe by saying it's all the fault of Netanyahu. There's no evidence for that. Some people say it's the problem of Ben Gvir and Smotrich. That's not true. The problem is a Jewish supremacist society. And I don't believe that the dogma of the left, that distinction between state and society, I do not believe it's valid in the case of what's going on now in Gaza. I mean, there are things that go on. I don't want to beat a dead horse. But like if you read the new UN report by Navi Pillay, there are quite a few pages given over to the targeting of children. I mean, it reached the point that even the opposition leader, he said at one point, the IDF is, I'm quoting him now, is targeting children as a hobby. And then he doubled down on it, but then the reaction became so overwhelming, he took it back. But that's not Netanyahu.
That's Israel.
That's Israel.
Mm.
Even Netanyahu in his UN speech, you know the expression, the broken clock is right twice a day. Well, Netanyahu says, everybody blames me for being opposed to a two-state settlement.
To a Palestinian state.
To a Palestinian state.
Mm.
He said, well, just last week, he said, the Knesset had a vote on do you support the Palestinian state? He said of 120 members, 9 voted in support of a Palestinian state. He said 90%, these are the representatives. Israel does, for the Jewish side, it has a real democracy. There's no question about that. It is a real democracy. I mean, you can have 10 people and actually, because of the structure of their Knesset, you can get a party with just a handful of people. I don't know if they've changed that law. Have they, Mouin?
You mean the threshold to get a...
Yeah.
I think they've raised it, but I don't know by how much.
They may have raised it. In any event, his point was, and I think it's valid. The point is, it's not me. It's everyone here. Now, you might say there are big demonstrations and so on and so forth. Yes, but the demonstrations are on very narrow issues. The demonstrations are on issues like, should we continue the genocide before the hostages are released or wait until they're released? But opposition to the genocide? No. And Mouin will remember, during the 1982 Lebanon War, the polls showed, and that was a horror. That's when I first got involved, June 82. Israel killed between June 5th, 1982 and the third week in September when Sabra and Shatila happened. The estimate is they killed between 15 and 20,000 Palestinians and Lebanese, overwhelmingly children. That was overwhelmingly supported by the Israeli
Until it started to go wrong.
What went wrong was Sabra and Shatila, because everybody was embarrassed. For your listeners, those were massacres in the refugee camps in Lebanon.
Beirut.
In Beirut, which Israel brought, they were called the Phalange militias, the right-wing militias, and brought them into the camps, sealed the camp shut, and then the militias killed the Palestinian refugees. The demonstrations, and there it was, it's true, it was about 1/3 of Israeli society. 1/3 were out demonstrating after Sabra and Shatila. But that's because they were embarrassed. It was at that point, Israeli society was different. They used to mock Israelis. Even Israelis mocked Israelis.
Sorry, Norm, I think it was around 400,000 is the official figure for that demonstration after Sabra.
Okay, I'm mistaken. Okay.
And I think the total population was maybe 6-7 million at that time.
Yeah. Always correct me when I make an error, because I don't want it. I want the record to be clear. So the Israelis used to mock themselves. You know what they called their performance? They called it shooting and crying. That when you kill them, you're supposed to cry. Israel. So, and it was mocked, but even by Israelis, by the way, it was called the shooting and crying culture. The difference now is, you know what the difference is? They don't bother
shooting
crying.
And cheering.
Let me to that point.
Exactly.
I want to play this for you. I've had it queued up for a while. I queued it up when you guys were talking about all of the paid influencers who are getting $7,000 a post and stuff. This is one of the paid influencers. And to your point, it's not about shooting and crying anymore. There's a kind of mockery in some of these paid posts that, as you can see from my tweet here, might lead you to believe that Israel was intentionally trying to foment anti-Semitism. If you were trying to do that, I suspect it would sound something like this. Take a listen.
Imagine supporting people who start wars, just to lose the wars so they can cry about it and then try it all again.
You must see anti-Semites are literally obsessed with Jews. Now walk with me. While you must see anti-Semites are stacking eviction notices, Jews are out here stacking up businesses.
Jews control all the industries. Maybe if you spent more time taking notes from successful people, you wouldn't have to spend your nights and weekends spreading hate from your anonymous account with an anime profile picture.
Do you work as hard as Jews? Do you network like Jews? No, because you're too busy cheering on a group of musty terrorists who smell like dirty earring backs. And if we're going to keep it real, you're really mad because your income is giving side hustle.
Period.
How you going to hate from outside, Shabbat? You can't even get in.
Okay. So we've gone from it's anti-Semitic to say Jews control the media and real estate, whatever other finance, blah, 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 to being like, you're just jealous that you don't have as much money as Jews. And also you're musty, I guess. Like, it's when I saw this, I was like, holy shit. Like, sorry, excuse me. We're cursing, Mom. Whatever. But I was like, holy smokes. They can't be like, who is this for? Who is the audience for this?
Preaching to the converted. You know, just on this shooting and crying. And of course, they keep bringing out this Golda Meir slogan, you know, we can forgive them for killing us, but we can never forgive them for forcing us to murder all their children or whatever. So,
yeah.
You know, but the problem with Israeli propaganda is, you know, you may disagree with me, but I remember it as being sophisticated, and being sophisticated because it had a message tailor-made for each different audience. You know, it had one for Republicans, it had one for Democrats, it had one for liberals, it had one for religious Christians. You know, and it was able to be all things to all people. Now it's like they would violate their moral code, they would violate their political principles by pretending to be anything other than stormtroopers. You know, they can no longer pretend to want peaceful coexistence. They can no longer pretend that they accept equality or whatever. They've just you know, they've lost the plot, and it's that mindset, I think, that creates the kind of clips you just showed.
It also was interesting to me to see the choice of the Black influencer. I was thinking about this when we were talking about Van Jones. It has felt like this entire time, since long before Claudine Gay, that there was a particular animus directed toward, I mean, not that Claudine Gay, as we've discussed at length, Norm, was any kind of like hero for Palestine or anything, but there's been a particular kind of animus around Black pro-Palestine activists that it seems to be connected to how easy it is to sort of frame Black people as anti-Semitic, right?
No,
So it's like
that's totally correct. That's why,
and me too. Like I felt that way when I was getting the crackdown.
I'll make a candid remark. That's kind of why I admire you so much, because it is very difficult for a Black person to do what you do. It is. Even Dr. Cornel West, who I've come to know in recent years, I never really knew him except as a public personality. He had formed a kind of partnership with a guy named Dr. Michael Lerner from this magazine called Tikkun. And it was a very watered down criticism of Israel, very watered down. I'm talking about the 1980s, 1990s, you know. And then you came along, and I have to say, what was I don't know how often Mouin watches you, but you came along
Religiously every day.
You came along and you started to deliver up this critique as if you weren't Black. It's like, I don't care. You're not going to make me quiver because I'm Black, and you know, I've been seeing Black anti-Semitism. It was like, I don't care. And as I said, those last few weeks on the Hill. Did you watch that, Mouin? The last few weeks, where
I read about it.
she would not let go,
Hmm.
and you could see Ronnie Suave like, Brianna, stop it already! Don't you see what you're doing? You're destroying everything. Stop it! And she would not let go. And it was like, I don't give a darn if I'm black. That's not going to stop me from saying it. You know, how Henry Louis Gates, how he got his national reputation? Do you know how?
I don't.
Okay. So there was, in the 1990s, the allegations of black anti-Semitism. And the main person, of course, was,
Jesse Jackson.
Farrakhan.
Oh, yeah.
But also Jesse Jackson was thrown into the mix, and Farrakhan. So they orchestrate this hysteria about black anti-Semitism. Along comes Henry Louis Gates. You can Google it now. It'll come up. It was the biggest op-ed ever published in New York Times history. It was a full page in the New York Times op-ed page, and it had the graphic. It was typeset with a Star of David. It was typeset. That's it. That
Wow.
was it. You know, and that was he passed the litmus test. You know, and that's how he became a national fixture. You know, he was very powerful. I don't know what he is now, but he was effectively the equivalent of Booker T. Washington. All money for black people, scholars, all money went through him. He had to approve everything, which was what Booker T. Washington was, a machine. It wasn't the Tuskegee machine. It was the Gates Harvard machine. And that was the price he had to pay. Now, you know, the number of black anti-Semites you could fit in my apartment with still room left over. But he got, at that point, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong.
You know, look,
Yes, a lot of black people harbor stereotypes about Jews. No question in my mind about it. I know I have a lot of African American friends. I know their families. They harbor stereotypes, but guess what? You know what? We all harbor stereotypes about
and I would
everybody.
say it's less it's not like a superiority movement. It's not, I think Jews are inferior. I think they have horns on their head. It's nothing like that.
Usual stereotypes. Jews control everything.
Well, no, it's even more. It's more like I hate my landlord, my Jewish landlord. I think is being racist to me, and I hate him.
Right.
You know,
that's true. But there's a world of, in my opinion, there's a world of difference between what you might call the invidious stereotypes running through people's heads and discriminating against people in such a way that affects their life opportunities. And when it comes to that particular issue, you ask yourself a simple question. Because in our society, racism and discrimination, it was also always defined by opportunity. Can you rent an apartment? Can you own a home in a certain neighborhood? Can you attend a certain college? Can you get a certain job? Or even, can you get into a certain country club? It was always issues of legal discrimination. Now, by that standard, I would like to see one person in the whole United States who would not rent to a Jew. I don't believe it exists anymore.
Didn't Claudine Gay expel all the Jews from Harvard?
That's such a fascinating example. That the opposite happened.
You're a lawyer. Now, as you know, a lot of the Jewish law firms like Paul Weiss Rifkin, the famous ones, they were created because the WASP wouldn't let them in. Okay?
I worked at one of the classic Jewish law firms, no longer in existence, R.I.P. Strick and Levan. But yeah.
Uh-huh. So ask yourself, how many law firms would refuse a Jewish lawyer now?
Well, let's get into this a little bit.
It's just a joke. It's just a joke.
Well,
So by that standard, which was the standard until recently, there's no anti-Semitism in the United States. Are there prejudices? Yes, for sure. The other day I'm going to tell you. The other day I went into a store. Mouin knows the joke is coming and he's wondering what the punchline is going to be. I go into the store. I buy a bag of chips for 99 cents. I go to the grocer and he says, $1. I said, I thought the bag cost 99 cents. So he goes for the penny, to give me the penny. I think to myself, okay, I was making a joke. And I thought to myself, okay, I just set back Black-Jewish relations.
You'll never recover.
Never recover. I was making a joke, and then he reached for the penny, and I know exactly what he's thinking. I know exactly. I will begin cheap something.
Okay. So, I don't want to get too far away. I know that we've gone on some frolics and detours, and I want to articulate this before I announce this next frolic and detour, that I would like, if you both are interested in it, to at least touch upon the Trump quote unquote peace plan, which seems like a notable development now that we're 2 years on this 2-year anniversary of October 7th. But also I want to raise, while we're on this subject, how to talk about what's going on now that you do have Zionist interests very openly buying entire media organizations with the goal of suppressing pro-Palestine content, namely this CBS and TikTok move, and the open repression of speech on college campuses that's pro-Palestinian speech, the defunding of Arab studies departments, the firing of professors, including tenured professors, all in the name of Zionism. How do you then talk about, and we should mention Mark Lamont Hill as another Black early advocate for Palestine, who was one of the first chips to fall many years before October 7th. How do we talk about, because I have been very conscious throughout of course not wanting to, I remember feeling like I was fighting, frankly, with one hand tied behind my back sometimes on Rising, because sometimes the truth does feel borderline anti-Semitic because of the conflation of Judaism and Israel and the depravity of what's been going on in Gaza. I remember because of the fighting that was happening behind the scenes at Rising, I was forced to put every Gaza-related story into my radar because otherwise they wouldn't cover it. And that was the last place where we were allowed to have editorial freedom. So here I go for 20 minutes saying, look at how evil and craven Israel is in all of these different respects. Look how they're repressing speech here. And look how many kids they killed here. And look at all these pictures over here. And look at this horrible thing Smotrich said here. And look at what the UN says about the rape claims here. And yada, 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 yada. And the truth would feel overwhelming. Look, I understand it. So now that things are in some ways are so much even more in the open in terms of the influence over the media in particular and the nature of that particular stereotype, do you have thoughts? And Mouin, as someone who's not Jewish, I'm curious how you feel about it as well, since obviously there's a way that Norman is insulated from some of these accusations, although not entirely. As you know, Norm, you were banned from Rising, I was told, because you were a quote unquote Holocaust denier. But like how going forward, do you feel like basically there's a lot more freedom to say the thing because the accusation of anti-Semitism has lost?
It's become a term of political insult. It has lost all meaning. I mean, anti-Semitism, as it's used today, has absolutely no relationship anymore with anti-Semitism as we understood it growing up, and that's in fact a very dangerous thing, because genuine anti-Semitism can now be dismissed as trying to, use it for political opportunism or whatever. I mean, when you're falsely accused so many times, you can only cry wolf 85,000 times. When you do it 85,001 time, there's a risk people won't take you seriously. And if anti-Semitism was an irrelevance and not an issue, then it wouldn't be so important. But it is real, and it could rear its head in very ugly ways, in a context where many people will refuse or cannot take it seriously. That's, they're playing with fire, these Israel apologists. They're really playing with fire.
I don't like the stupid woke language, but I don't want to center anti-Semitism now. There's a genocide occurring, but there is a problem there. I could see it. I already mentioned in the program, I could see the way certain right-wing people, conventionally right-wing people, are raising this Israel issue, which is making me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And as I said, I will be on some programs where I have to be careful. But then the question is, the question you posed, Brianna, what's the right way to discuss these things when they can't be ignored? They just can't be ignored. What happened? We had the most massive assault on academic freedom and free speech on college campuses in our country's history in the spring of 2024. Who was behind it? There was no secret. The Jewish billionaire class was flaunting the fact that they were going to withhold their alumni contributions. And those were big bucks. At Harvard, I read in the Harvard report, one alumni gave $200 million to Harvard. Another alumni gave $300 million to Harvard. And they were protesting now, over the encampments and anti-Semitism and so forth. Are you supposed to pretend that's not happening?
I want to throw in.
I understand, though that's inflammatory terrain. I get that. But on the other hand, I think those are significant facts and they can't be ignored.
Especially when you have Iran and Qatar with all their misinformation.
And as our conversation has highlighted, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Here I am in a debate with this guy who always has a sneer on his face. He looks like a disgruntled cockroach, that thing called destiny. And then, lo and behold, what do you discover? He's being paid. Bari Weiss, I wouldn't even trust Bari Weiss's recipe for latkes. I wouldn't. She's an idiot. And then she's catapulted to the head of CBS News. How? Money. Everywhere you turn. And then how do you deal with it? I think I do recognize I have the immunities so I can deal with it. But I also recognize I could be making the problem, abetting the problem
How so?
by saying, well, actually, they do have a lot of money and they do control a lot.
Well, does the problem all boil down to who the they is? If you say Zionists control the media, they're going to clip that. But if you say Zionists control the media, is that okay? Is that true? Is that enough? You know, and the other example I would throw in there, just so we don't forget it, before October 7th, I remember controversially talking about this on Rising. Do you remember when JP Morgan ended its banking relationship with Kanye West over his anti-Semitic remarks? Now, the issue in dispute is not whether or not Kanye West tweeting out a combo Star of David swastika was anti-Semitic. I think that we can all agree that Kanye West is on his own journey. But the question is,
That's a nice
at what point did being a bigot disqualify you from having a relationship with a bank, a major bank?
Used to be a requirement
with Epstein, right? What's that?
It used to be a requirement.
It used to be a requirement. Yes, to get into the clubs that Norm just alluded to earlier. Yeah, so the idea that you can be a convicted pedophile and continue your banking relationship with JP Morgan, but you do some anti-Semitism on Twitter and that's the line, should raise a lot of concerns for people, because where does it stop? You can oust the president. This was a harbinger of things.
That issue came up, and I lost a good friend over the issue. Mouin knows, because he was acting as an interlocutor when I had this falling out with somebody who actually, he was very good to me, and I never forget people who are kind to me. The issue came up with Mel Gibson. When he did Passion of the Christ. And there were allegedly anti-Semitic scenes in the film. He then was pressured to remove those scenes from the film. And you can imagine, like Charlie Kirk, he didn't like these people telling him what to do. And one day he was in a drunk driving accident, and he starts uttering all of these anti-Semitic statements.
I remember.
Okay? Do you remember all this, Brianna?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. So I said, I don't really care if
Mel Gibson
is an anti-Semite. Is that the standard? Because a lot of people called for him to be censored and they wanted to boycott the film. I said, is that the standard now? Have you ever read the things David Mamet has said about Arabs? I mean, it would make your skin crawl. Does that mean he shouldn't have made Glengarry? What was the film called? Glengarry Glen
Ross. Yeah.
Glen Ross. It was a great film. Okay, he's an anti-Arab bigot, but are we now going to use the standard that because Mel Gibson uttered these anti-Semitic? I don't really care. It doesn't. I mean, I don't like the guy, but that's not going to be the standard for being allowed to produce a movie.
Norm, I like that you're making the argument for playing R. Kelly's remix to Ignition at parties, as we debated at the last karaoke jam I attended over this past weekend. Like, yeah, I get it. You can separate the art from the artist. People come on different sides of this debate. I certainly think if you want to not go to a movie and boycott it, and members of your community who are offended don't want to consume it, that's obviously your right. But this question of, I think when we're talking about banking institutions, when we're talking about media institutions, I saw the owner, one of the co-founders of Substack, tweeting favorably about Bari Weiss today, and it raised some concerns for folks. I mean, is Substack going to become a place that doesn't tolerate Israel critical views, or is this just the founder of Substack celebrating that his best performing child has reached such heights? I don't know what it is.
Does anybody watch CBS News? I was told the only thing people watch is occasionally 60 Minutes. Nobody watches it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why it was the target, right? Because 60 Minutes had done like some good coverage of Palestine. It wasn't like this one good report, one good show that was embarrassing enough, I think, to justify the whole channel being purchased and converted into.
You would not believe what it was like. You know, I remember, I wonder if Mouin remembers, after the Lebanon war. So 60 Minutes did a program on Sabra and Shatila. Do you remember this?
Not that one, no.
And it was relatively accurate. And the whole Jewish establishment, they came down so hard on Mike Wallace, who was Jewish.
Mm.
You know, how could
and
you
he did one on the Jewish community of Syria that also almost cost him his head.
So that was par for the course back then. What happened now is the consensus has shifted. But to act as if Bari Weiss is the first executive director of the news who is going to be towing the Israel line, no. That's the whole history of the media in the United States. There has been first of all, in my day, everybody watched. Mouin, you were in the Mouin was the Tufts University, so you will remember. Everybody watched either CBS, NBC, or ABC News. Those were the three stations, and everybody knew the news anchors. I could tell you now, CBS was Walter Cronkite, NBC was Huntley and Brinkley, and ABC it changed. It was less constant, and you couldn't get anything on Israel Palestine back then.
Yeah, if I could just make a point on 60 Minutes, you may remember in August or September 2023, they did a segment on Netanyahu's judicial agenda. And at one point, they interview this young woman who is a pilot in the Israeli Air Force.
That might be Achman's wife.
Excuse me?
That might be Achman's wife.
No, she was speaking coherently, not quoting Wikipedia. Couldn't have been her. No, but and she was explaining the reason she cares so deeply about this issue is because at some point she may be asked by her government to drop bombs on children. And in order to do so, she has to have full trust in the political leaders who basically order her to slaughter children. And it was presented as kind of a genuinely legitimate political dilemma to have. You know, I'm prepared to drop bombs that slaughter kids, but I need to have faith in the political leaders who are ordering me to do this. And if I have faith in them, then it's moral and legitimate. So that was the first issue. But the second issue is, until today, to the best of my knowledge, CBS News has never gone back to that pilot and asked her, how many kids have you slaughtered?
Yeah.
You know, and you've done so under the same leader who you were criticizing.
That's exactly how I feel on this whole issue. And I'm going to have to end it here. I love the both of you, but that's the problem. I could be on all night with both of you. So I have to curb my enthusiasm. But that to me is, we covered a lot of ground, different things. That to me is the heart of the anti-Semitism issue as it emerged at Harvard College. Because if you read their 314-page report, and I already discussed it with Brianna when we were speaking.
Good, so I don't have to look at it.
When you read the report, you need a high-powered microscope to see any anti-Semitism in the report. There was just nothing. It was, as they say, very slim pickings. So then the obvious question arises. If there's no evidence of anti-Semitism, how did they fill 314 pages? And the answer was very simple. They redefined anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism became, they said, for the purposes of this report, we will define anti-Semitism as any instance where a Jew, American Jew, and in particular an Israeli Jew, feels like he or she is being excluded from either a classroom, extracurricular activities, or social activities. That's going to be the standard for the touchstone of anti-Semitism. And then they said that Harvard College prides itself on being inclusive and pluralistic. So the panacea for anti-Semitism is we all have to come together. We have to be inclusive. We have to be pluralistic. So I say, that's a bridge too far. I'm not making a joke here. I'm being dead serious. I'm not being inclusive of child killers. The UN report, it said, the most recent one, and it was Navi Pillay, they're serious. Navi Pillay is the former human rights chief for the UN, and she was the president of the tribunal on Rwanda. She's a serious. She says they were targeting the IDF soldiers. They were targeting toddlers. TODDLER.
You're talking about snipers now.
She didn't say if it was snipers. She said they were targeted. She said they described like a little child in the mother's arm who was being targeted. So my view is, if somebody goes to Harvard, they have to declare on their application. I think there's been some change about this, but they have to declare whether or not, oh no, that was a demand at Princeton. They have to declare whether or not they had a misdemeanor, a felony, on their record. Why shouldn't Israelis have to declare whether they killed an Arab child? You think that's a joke?
If I can,
there's a big difference between stealing a bag of chocolates, and was it a misdemeanor, and killing a child.
Some 99-cent chips.
Yeah.
Norm, if I could just.
But that to me, what Harvard wants to do. It wants to normalize genocide. That student, he worked in a soup kitchen for a summer vacation. That student, she went to Africa and helped build an infirmary. And then there's the Israeli. Oh, I killed a few kids. It's pluralism.
I mean, it's interesting that when
Let's all get together. No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. When I was in school, the big controversy was that they didn't allow ROTC on campus. Now, they did not allow ROTC on campus because of the Iraq War. Like, it wasn't because of the violence of the U.S. military. It's because they didn't allow gays in the military, which is an interesting maybe reflection on the priorities of the school and identity versus sort of like substantive imperialism. But that's neither here nor there.
If I could just and end on a hopeful note, because Norm, you said you need to go. As you know, when you apply for a U.S. visa, it asks, have you been a member? Are you a communist? Are you a Nazi? Are you this or are you that? And other countries do the same. I recently had to apply for a visa to a country, a Western country, where one of the questions I was asked is, have you served in the Israel Defense Forces?
Oh, snap. Really?
And I was so elated to be confronted with that question. I was tempted to check yes just to see what would happen.
Wait, what country was it?
I can't 100% recall, and I just I won't reveal, but it's a true story. And we have heard stories also of some citizens in certain cases being interrogated when they return to their countries about their military service in the Israeli military. And this is, we were talking earlier about the Mamdani campaign.
Mm-hmm.
This too is a sea change that would have been inconceivable even a few years ago. A few years ago, they would have singled these people out for reward and gratitude and celebration and awards.
Yeah, the IDF, they used to come to the United States, and all the American Jews would worship them.
Yes.
Because of the what was said of the Jews during World War II, they went like sheep to slaughter.
Yeah. And now they're slaughtering. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So there was the pride that now we're fighters. That's how the Israelis were always described, as the fighters, fighters. And for Jews, it was a real high. It was a real high. Here is Moshe Dayan. He's not only a fighter, he's generally credited with the main role in the June 67 war. He wore a patch. Not only a Jewish fighter, a Jewish pirate. And he was known to be a womanizer, Diane. So for American Jews, this was such a high. There was a good book put out by this guy named Paul Brines. It's called Tough Jews. And he goes through like the literature that was coming out in the US in the 80s and 90s. And it was all the images of the tough Jews, the Israeli fighters. So when Mouin says it's a real sea change now, you don't want to check the box. I was in the IDF. And you know what? That's absolutely rational. The fact is, and again, it goes against the grain of a dogma on the left. And it also goes against the grain of a certain individualistic ethic where, in our law, where each person has to be held accountable individually for a crime. Obviously, there's conspiracy and things like that, but you get my point. Everybody, yes, I'm going to repeat, every Israeli in Gaza is complicit in the genocide. Okay, maybe you're not shooting a child in the skull and chest. Maybe you're just preventing food from coming into Gaza. The UN report describes how Israel prohibits I don't know, you'll know better than me, Mouin's a father, and you would know anyhow, the special baby formula you need for children. There's a special one.
Yes, baby formula.
Yeah, but I think there's a special baby formula that certain children need.
This is for malnourished children. It's like a peanut butter based paste or something.
Israel won't let it in.
It's supposed to be high in protein or something.
So maybe you're implicated in that.
You're implicated in something that we know for certain.
That's exactly the point. Every Israeli serving in Gaza is implicated in the genocide. I'm not saying that cheerfully. That's just a fact. That's what it means to serve in Gaza right now.
How do you wrestle? This is one of those moments where I find myself rising like,
saying that's not fair. That's collective punishment.
No, not.
It's collectively true.
Well, that's
not
exactly.
I'm not intimidated by slogans. It's collective punishment. It's an anti-Semitic trope. True is true.
I guess what I'm curious about is how you parse that. How you marry that with the idea, with the truth of all of the propaganda that Israelis are subjected to? At what point does I mean, like, I don't deny, I mean, I can't believe I'm like at all coming to their defense, but I guess the humanist.
I don't think that's true. As Mouin knows, because we correspond regularly and we disagree on many things. I mean, not to the point of verbal fisticuffs. We disagree. Israelis are not like victims of propaganda. Per capita, they have the highest usage of the web of any country in the world.
Norm, we sit here in a country where
they know exactly what's going on.
But Norm, we sit here in a country where obviously Donald Trump has been elected twice, and at least half the population likes what he's doing, right? More or less. And so I even then I have some discomfort with this idea that like half of, at least, even if let's say we could separate the red states from the blue states out, that the red states kind of deserved what was coming, or the red states should, you know, I don't know.
I think there's a fundamental distinction, which when I was with Dr. West and Nadine Strassen, who I think the world of, absolutely, I think the world of her. She's the former president of the ACLU and just a really decent human being. I mean, her politics are not my politics, and sometimes I can't understand how she could even share a same room with me, let alone the same stage, but all power to her. I think there's a kind of confusion which is so fundamental, and I don't get why people don't see it. It's the confusion between words and conduct. That's the most basic distinction when it comes to issues of free speech. As you know, John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, the first 2 chapters are on free speech. The last 3 chapters are on conduct. Conduct raises totally different questions. We're not talking about people who voted for Trump and do they deserve what they got. We're talking about murderers.
Right, but those are, and I understand that there's mandatory conscription, and so obviously we're talking about a lot of people who at some point in their lives served in the IDF. But the same
There's
is
two problems with the mandatory conscription argument. Number one, they have the option of not serving.
No, that's not why I brought up mandatory conscription. The mandatory conscription point was in favor of your argument. I'm saying I understand that what you say is true because these people acted because they all served because they had to, but because they all served is my point, or most of them served. But I still have some. It's not because of what it says about them, it's but what it says about us and how it motivates our behavior. I'm always going to be a little wary of painting with the broad brush when we're talking about what our actions should be versus what our kind of moral judgments should be.
Brianna,
if we're talking about Nuremberg and war crimes and assessing people and like through a due process means about what they've done and what they're accountable for, of course, I pray that one day that happens. When we're having conversations about the sort of, I don't know, I don't know what, something's doesn't quite sit as comfortably for me with that kind of characterization and that kind of assessment because of how easily that can get exploited. I mean, how do we not tip over into they're Hamas, the deaths don't matter? How do you not tip over into I met an Israeli, I'm going to judge them after I do
that. I never did that. I'm
not saying you did, but the kind of assessments that we're making. Now.
If I'm meeting somebody and he or she says, I'm an Israeli, I go, and I don't do it like dramatically. It's just a visceral reaction. I go, and I walk away. Maybe like the title of a book I wrote a long time ago. The title of the book is Knowing Too Much. Maybe I know too much. Maybe I sit and read all these human rights reports day in and day out. I read the horrors day in and day out. I stare at a sentence that says 10 kids every day lose one or both of their legs. I read another sentence that says they're targeting toddlers. I put that together with the opposition leader who says they kill the kids as a hobby. And I'm perfectly fine with a broad brush because I think it's a broad brush genocide. It's not a state project.
Well, look.
But I'm going to have to
Well,
leave
look,
now.
Mouin was leaving us off optimistically, and I will too. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you.
tonight. I will leave this on the screen that whatever you want to say about the rise of maybe real anti-Semitism among some of these right-wing people and the flirtation with it because of all of the frustration with Zionist interests buying up the media. At the end of the day, remember the story? A few days ago, when a Nazi student walked into the classroom and started hiling and saying actually anti-Semitic things, this professor chased him out of the classroom and halfway across campus with a phalanx of students from the class behind her and cussed him out and had him detained. So that does suggest to me that people are able to keep these things in their head at the same time. The separation between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, the hatred of what Israel is doing, and also the hatred of self-styled contemporary Nazis.
Okay, good. I agree with that.
Thank you, both of you again. Do you want to tell the audience where they can find you and your work in the internet or beyond, or any new projects that are coming up that people should be attentive to?
Well, I post pretty much everything I do on Substack, and I'm coming out with a book early next year called Gaza Apocalypse.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, but I look forward to reading it and to talking with you about it on Bad Faith Podcast, hopefully. And Norm?
I've been working on a book called Gaza's Grave Diggers. It's a pretty technical book on, the subtitle is Inquiry into Corruption in High Places, about people in the elite circles of international institutions who, in my view, are either bribed or blackmailed by Israel and played a very pernicious role in the
like
last
Destiny.
I was looking for this clip, by the way. Destiny went on the Adam Friedland show after you and I talked about it, Norm, and wouldn't stop complaining about our interview about your debate.
I know.
And at one point, Adam Friedland goes, Brianna Joy Gray? What are you even talking about, Brianna Joy Gray? Like, who is this woman? And I love that clip so much. And I was looking for it. I can't find it. If anybody knows where to find it, please drop it in my mentions. But I want to say, I love being even a small part of the story about how the two of you just demolished that thing.
Can I just say, Benny Morris and I were extras in that show. No, I'm serious. No. It was quite clearly a setup in which Destiny and whoever is behind him were foolish enough to think that this is the one encounter that is required to destroy Norman Finkelstein's reputation and expose him as a fraud. I mean, imagine the idiocy.
The miscalculation was they thought that I would carry on like Noam Chomsky. Professor Chomsky never lowers himself. Dershowitz will hurl all these epithets, and Professor Chomsky always takes the high road. Norman, no. If you take the low road, Norman is going to take the low road. You moron. You fantastic moron.
And he'll never recover.
I'm going to change the thumbnail for this.
They didn't think the professor would do that. They really didn't. He was totally shocked.
I'm changing the thumbnail for this episode because I picked these grave, solemn images of the two of you to advertise this. And somehow you guys have managed to inject some much needed levity into how awful and goofy and ridiculous the world we live in is. So I appreciate both of you. Thank you for spending the time. I'm going to release both of you.
I think the world of both of you. And I
likewise.
Mouin's been a friend for 40 years now, I guess, right?
Since the around, I think we met in the 90s.
Oh, 90s? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And Brianna is a recent acquisition. And I think I told you in an email that
Yes.
I wrote to Rihanna that she reminds me of my high school crush in Angela Davis.
No higher compliment. I'll tell you that the best compliment and worst insult in one blow I once got was that I both resembled and wrote like James Baldwin. And I couldn't even get mad at it because I saw it. I see it. I see it.
That's
I'll take
what I would
Angela
call,
Davis any day.
that's what I would call one term canceling the other. Oh my God.
A Leo King, much like myself, so I couldn't be mad. All right, guys, I'll let you go. I'm going to hang around a little longer and answer some of the questions that people put in the chat, but I'll release both of you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Bye-bye.
right,
Bye.
take care. Good night. Okie dokie. I'm not going to forget these questions that you guys have asked. Candace, thank you for that. Oh, these are just super stickers and not actual questions. Perfect. Then we can get out of here. I want to remind everybody to subscribe to Bad Faith Podcast here on YouTube. Hit the notification bell. Some of you have remarked that you don't get notifications when we go live. I have also seen that. I know I don't stream very often, so that's part of why the algorithm hates me, but I'm trying to do more of that. I want to flag this Thursday's episode is going to be a banger with a really special guest that is going to be lighter fare. So if you are tired of depressing news about the world, you can look forward to that. Don't forget to hit the like button as you leave. And if you haven't already watched Monday's episode with Max Blumenthal, he speaks very candidly about Matt Taibbi, his failure to cover any First Amendment issue that relates to Gaza, as well as some of the mystery around, or like the speculation around who might have killed Charlie Kirk that's different from what the government story is so far. And a lot of really far-ranging topics, including the 2028 perspective raise, what the left should be doing, and some domestic politics stuff that I don't think that he gets into very frequently, and which I was very interested to hear about from him. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. This episode, stream was Norm and Mouin's idea, and I'm really glad that they suggested it. It's always such a treat to be together with the both of them. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember to keep the faith.